Sy Hersh sprach im Interview mit der Berliner Zeitung über den Terroranschlag auf die Nord Stream Pipelines und dass US-Präsident Joe Biden lieber Deutschland frieren lassen wollte, als dass sich Berlin gegen die Ukraine-Politik der US-Regierung stellen würde. Was sagt das über diesen Präsidenten aus?
In an interview with the Berliner Zeitung, Sy Hersh talked about the terrorist attack against the Nord Stream pipelines and stated that US President Joe Biden would rather let Germany freeze than have Berlin oppose the US government's Ukraine policy. What does that say about this president?
Well, let me just start off by talking about Sy Hersh. I think it's important that there be full disclosure. He's a very close friend of mine. He's been a good friend of mine for 25 years. And I am heavily biased in favor of Sy Hersh. So people need to understand that when I answer this question, that there is a bias here. And what I mean by that is knowing him the way I do, I trust his reporting. I trust that his reporting is accurate, that it is within the facts that he lays out are contextual. They're not exaggerated. And I can also say that I don't believe that Sy Hersh is trying to score political points for or against anybody. He's simply somebody who is searching for the truth. And in this case, the truth is horrible, especially if you're an American. And the truth is embarrassing, especially if you're a German. If you think about what he says, let's just parse it out. That the President of the United States made a decision to do something knowing that it would harm the citizens of an ally, or should I say of an erstwhile ally, because how can you be an ally if you're even considering an attack? And that's just what this was. This was an attack on Germany. This was an act of war. I'll let the Germans do the final calculation as to the economic costs, but this was an economic Pearl Harbor, a surprise attack that destroyed the German economy. There's no other way to put this. There is literally no other way to put this. So what Seymour Hersh is saying is that the United States put its selfish ambitions ahead of the well-being of the people of a nation that's supposed to be a close ally, military and political. And if I were a German, I would be looking at this saying, then why are we friends with America, with friends like these who needs enemies? America is the worst friend possible because we lie to you. We abandon you. We deceive you. We attack you. We wish to do you harm. Cheap Russian gas was not a threat to the United States. Cheap Russian gas was that which made Germany the economic superpower that it was. Without cheap Russian gas, Germany would not enjoy many of the economic advantages that it had. It could afford not only to, be industrial, engaged in an industrial fashion, but this meant jobs. This meant a good tax base. This meant a nice standard of living. All things that Germans had come to expect as the norm. To be a German worker was to live a good life. No more. No more. Why? Because your friend attacked you. Your friend stabbed you in the back. And this is the importance of Sy Hersh's article. I mean, we can get into the Tom Clancy nitty gritty, the salinity of explosives and the frequency of the sonar buoy and, the chill of the waves as they slapped against the hull of the ship or the divers sunk into the water. I mean, that's all cool stuff. And I applaud Sy for capturing that because half the aspect of selling an idea is making it readable, making people want to read it. But the true strength of this article isn't the adventurous details of the betrayal that took place, but the harsh, cold reality that the President of the United States made a deliberate decision to harm the people of Germany. And the German people need to chew on that. And their politicians need to chew on that. And I will say this, if in a year's time, Germany still allows American bases to operate on its soil, it is a cuckold nation. If in a year's time, Germany still allows American nuclear weapons to reside on German soil, it's a cuckold nation. If Germany continues to pretend that America is its friend and Russia is its enemy, it is a cuckold nation. And that's what Cy Hirsch's article has done. It's exposed the awful reality of the abusive relationship between the United States and Germany. And hopefully Germany will wake up and understand that going forward as an abused spouse is no future. There are bruises on your face, Germany. Look in the mirror. It didn't come from an accident. The person you thought loved you hit you because they don't love you. And it's time for you to recognize that and walk away.
NATO-Generalsekretär Jens Stoltenberg sagte kürzlich, dass die Ukraine mehr Munition verbraucht, als alle NATO-Länder zusammen produzieren. Wie schätzen Sie die Stärke der NATO ein?
NATO Secretary-General Jens Stoltenberg recently said that Ukraine uses more ammunition than all NATO countries combined are able to produce. How do you evaluate NATO's military power?
I've been clear for a long time that NATO is a paper tiger. But, it's no newsflash. There's not a NATO general officer who doesn't know the truth, who doesn't know the awful truth that NATO can't fight a war. Cannot. Again, I mean, how many Leclerc tanks can France get out of the barracks? The entire nation of France, the number one army in Europe, as they'll like to tell you. I will bet you they can't get more than 50 tanks out of the barracks right now because the rest are broken. Can't maintain them. 50 tanks is a superpower. You know what the life expectancy of 50 tanks is on the Ukrainian-Russian battlefield? About a day and a half. How many tanks can Germany get out of its barracks? The vaunted Leopard 2 A7. Ooh, the best tank in the world. Well, it's not. But Germany can't even get a battalion's worth out. Again, less than 50. So that's it. The German army wants to fight Russia, which has over 2,000 tanks assembled right now in Ukraine, with 50 Leopard 2 A7 tanks. Wow, I'm scared. I'm frightened. I'm trembling. Not out of fear, but out of concern, because the German army would be slaughtered on the field of battle. The British army can't even fill a soccer stadium. I mean, you can get more people attending the Kaiserslautern football club game than you can to get, England to mobilize. It's pathetic. And now we come to the harsh facts. And here's the interesting thing. Stoltenberg and NATO are only waking up now publicly saying what was obvious to everybody. In September, when the Ukrainians launched their vaunted counteroffensive, and it failed. Everybody said, well, it didn't fail, Scott. They took territory. It failed because it wasn't supposed to take territory. It was supposed to defeat Russia, and they didn't. And in the process, those reserves were destroyed. But that's not the news flash. The news flash was, in order to fight Russia in a large-scale ground combat, Ukraine was using prodigious amounts of artillery ammunition. And all NATO people were looking at that. It's just simple math, going, wait a minute, if Ukraine is firing, 12,000 rounds a day, and we can manufacture 100,000 rounds a month, in 10 days, I'm just a simple Marine, but that's 120,000 rounds of ammunition. So in 10 days, Ukraine has already used 20,000 rounds more than can be produced. Now, if NATO had a 1 million round reserve, that means that, again, I'm just a simple Marine, but 1 million rounds will be consumed in, let's say, 110,000 rounds every 10 days. It's gone in a couple months. So NATO has lost its artillery ammunition reserve. It's gone, depleted. There's nothing left, which means if NATO went to war today against Russia, they would lose on day two. Day two. How could that be, Scott? Because you don't have any ammunition. You don't have any ammunition. The senior American officer, the head of the NATO command, spoke in Sweden last month, And he said, what's going on in Ukraine is on a scope and scale beyond which anybody in NATO ever imagined. Nobody imagined this, which means they have a total lack of imagination, because for at least a decade now, NATO's been thumping their chest saying, we want to fight Russia. We can take on Russia. We're going to build up to the east. Oh, really? You're going to fight Russia with what? How many sausage-eating German soldiers can get out of the barracks? I'm not picking on them, but they're a peacetime military. They're a little plump, a little soft around the middle. They're not hard soldiers. They don't know how to fight. They don't even want to fight. They want to wear uniforms, go to balls, pick up girls, and think life is great. That's not war, fellas. War is getting dirty, muddy, hungry, no sleep, bleeding, fear, killing. That's war. You know who's doing it? The Russians. Ukrainians are doing it. Ukrainians, even though I don't like significant aspects of it, they're better men than any German soldier because they're doing the job. They're better men than any French soldier because they're doing the job. They're better men than any British soldier because they're doing the job. They're doing a job and they're dying. 300,000 Ukrainian soldiers are dead in less than a year. From an American perspective, we lost 300,000 soldiers in all of World War II, fighting both the Japanese and the Germans. 300,000. The Ukrainians have lost that in less than a year. People need to chew on that number. A scope and scale, an intensity of conflict that is mind-bending, and no NATO general is ready for that. They would cry on day one by what happened to their troops. Their wonderful sausage-eating German soldiers would go in there and get fried like bacon. Because that's what happens when peacetime soldiers enter the horrific reality of war. NATO can't fight. NATO doesn't know how to fight. NATO doesn't have any equipment to fight. The NATO Air Force. Day one, take off your airplanes. Oh, what? 70% of them can't even get off the ground. Why? Because you haven't maintained them for the last 15 years. The ones that take off the ground, the pilots don't know how to fight. They've taken off, they've flown circles, then they land. That's not combat. Combat is actually going up there and doing the job against an enemy that's prepared to kill you. Combat is learning how to penetrate integrated air defenses that will shoot you down at a moment's notice, the first mistake you make. And I'm telling you right now, every NATO pilot will make 20 mistakes the first day of combat, which means 20 times they're going to die. All of them. They don't know how to fight. They don't know how to fly. And they don't have the ability to sustain it even if they could. NATO has no artillery ammunition. They knew this back in September when they did the math. And here's the real tragedy of it. Only now are they being honest with the Ukrainians. On February 14th, I don't know if Germany celebrates St. Valentine's Day. It's a big holiday here in America, but it's a day where, lovers are supposed to get together. Men court their women with flowers and candy, and they treat them very well. And so on St. Valentine's Day, the Ukrainian contact group met in Ramstein, and the Ukrainians came in thinking they were going to be courted by NATO, be given flowers in the form of tanks and jet aircraft, and, oh, we love you. But they were given the harsh reality. This ain't love. This isn't anything other than you're our compliant mistress, and we're going to continue to abuse you. And rather than give you a ring, let me give you the awful reality that you're going to lose the war. Because that's what NATO told Ukraine. There is no artillery ammunition. You will run out of ammunition, and there's nothing we can do to save you. You will run out of ammunition sometime this summer, and we don't have anything to give you. You are going to lose this war. That's what Ukraine was told. And now NATO has to start being honest about it. That's why Jens Stoltenberg came out and said there is no ammunition. Now, he thinks that because he's Jens Stoltenberg, he can snap his fingers and make industrial production lines appear out of magic. It doesn't work that way, Jan. Ask the Germans. Hey, Germany, start producing artillery ammunition today. Oh, you can't, can you? Why not? You don't have a production line. Why not? Because you shut it down. Why? Because you never thought you were going to fight the Russians. Oh, then why did you talk big? Where's your ammunition now, Germany? When can you get that production line up? A year? Not too late. Ukraine's dead. So, this is the horrific reality. People don't understand. I don't know. Was Game of Thrones a thing in Germany? I don't know. It was a big thing in the United States. Huge thing. And there was a scene in near the end of the series where the Dothraki are charging down. And you've got the little line of Lannister men ready to fight bravely. But though this character turns and said, we're going to get swamped. Oh, yeah. Well, the Russians are the Dothraki. They're coming down, and the Ukrainians are about to get swamped. And that's the harsh reality. And the only people to blame are the donut-eating, sausage-eating, fat, no-good NATO officers and politicians who have led themselves into believing that they amount to something, but they amount to nothing. And as a result, the Ukrainian people, the Ukrainian army is about to get sacrificed, and the Ukrainian nation. There won't be Ukraine after this. Thank you, NATO.
Polen rüstet seit langem massiv auf und führt gleichzeitig eine mehr oder weniger partielle Mobilisierung durch. Was könnte Warschau Ihrer Meinung nach mit diesen Maßnahmen bezwecken?
Poland has been massively rearming for a long time, while at the same time conducting a more or less partial mobilization. What do you think Warsaw might be aiming at with these measures?
Poland reminds me of the younger brother who has a big brother who's a football player, big guy on campus, you know. And so the younger brother's running around, pushing people, saying, my brother's there, my big brother's there. But what he doesn't realize is the big brother actually broke his leg and can't do anything. He's not there. Poland's out there talking big, puffing big, but they're just a little player. They're nothing. And they're getting so far out ahead of themselves that soon they're going to look back and realize that NATO's not there for them. But ahead of them is the schoolyard bully. Poland, what is Poland? I mean, it's a nation. 165,000 troops. Not very good. Like everybody else, they haven't been training. Their equipment doesn't work. They want to build up an army of around 300,000. But where does that army come from? You don't just make armies overnight. You have to actually recruit the people. So that means you have to have a population that wants to do this, that agrees that mobilization is the right thing. And the Polish society is deeply split on this one. There are some nationalists who are keen, but a lot of other people say no. In fact, there are some Poles that remember the last time they tried to fight the Germans and the Russians, it didn't go well. In fact, the Poland disappeared. I'm not predicting that future because we live in the modern world. Poland is a member of NATO. They are protected by Article 5, guarantees of security. Russia has no intention of invading Poland. So what is Poland mobilizing for? It's a posturing, and it's a recognition of the reality that NATO isn't there for them. I think Poland's waking up to the fact that Article 5 is meaningless, especially if Poland picks a fight with Russia. So what Poland's trying to do is position itself for the post-NATO world, where Poland and the Baltics and maybe the Czech Republic and some others become their own alliance, their own military grouping backed by the United States. This is why Poland keeps telling the Americans, come, build a headquarters, bring your troops, build here, leave Germany, come to us. Because they know eventually old Europe, Germany, France, Italy, they don't want this war with Russia. They don't need this war with Russia, but Poland needs this to be viable. Because without this confrontation with Russia, if Poland had to actually pivot back to Europe and say, we want to be a member of Europe, what do they offer Europe? Is it a vibrant economy? Poland was being threatened to be kicked out of the European Union because they were an undemocratic society. Newsflash, people, Poland's still an undemocratic society. It's not a law-abiding, wonderful bastion of democracy. It is the second worst nation in Europe after Ukraine in terms of democracy. And yet now, because of this conflict, we've elevated Poland and we treat them as if they're something that they aren't. The Poles need to understand that as long as their troops stay in Poland, they're protected. But the second their troops leave Poland and they make a grab for Western Ukraine, there is no NATO protection. And the Russians will crush them. And that's the awful truth. And the same thing holds for the Baltic states. They talk big now because they feel that NATO's behind them. But at some point in time, if they overreach, if they seek to cut off Kaliningrad, if they seek to shut down the Gulf of Finland, then they cease to exist. And they only have themselves to blame. Well, they can also blame Sweden and Finland, because thanks to Sweden and Finland leaving their neutrality status and trying to join NATO, Russia has now expanded its military from 900,000 to 1.5 million, including a new grouping of forces in the Kola Peninsula area and reinforcing additional military districts to give Russia even more military capability. And remember, these are Russians. They know how to fight. They want to fight. They're not afraid of fighting. They're not fat donut-eating, pale-skinned, puffy NATO troops. These are lean, mean, hardened soldiers with combat-proven equipment. So Poland needs to watch out. There's a line from the movie Top Gun where a guy tells Maverick, Tom Cruise's character, that your ego is writing checks your body can't cash. Hey, Poland, your ego is writing checks your body can't cash.
Die Angst vor einem dritten Weltkrieg hat Umfragen zufolge etwas abgenommen. Dennoch wird viel darüber gesprochen, dass der sogenannte Odessa-Moment der Auslöser zu diesem tragischen Ergebnis sein könnte. Können Sie uns erklären, was dieser Odessa-Moment bedeutet?
According to polls, the fear of a Third World War has decreased slightly. Nevertheless, there is much talk that the so-called Odessa moment could be the trigger to such a tragic outcome. Can you explain what this Odessa moment means?
Russia has two objectives laid out in this. It's called a war. They call it a special military operation, but it's a war. It's become a war, and it's a war not just between Russia and Ukraine, but between Russia and NATO in the collective West. NATO is using Ukraine as a proxy. Russia's about to win this war. First objective is the demilitarization of Ukraine. That means literally the destruction of the Ukrainian army. And that's taking place right now in horrific fashion. And it will continue through the spring into the summer. And I believe by early fall, there won't be a Ukrainian army left. We talked about that, artillery, ammunition, et cetera, et cetera. The destruction of the Ukrainian army will take place in a campaign designed to liberate the totality of Russia's newly acquired territories, Kherson, Zaporizhia, Donetsk, Lugansk, and to push the Ukrainians back beyond artillery range. Now, that used to be just an 80-kilometer buffer that Russia was looking for, but now thanks to Ukraine's good friends, the United States, who have decided to provide them with 150-kilometer range weapons, the Russian buffer will now go to 150 kilometers. This means Kharkov will become Russian, and other territories might become Russian as well. There's a little breakaway area called Transnistria between Moldova and Ukraine. About 400,000 pro-Russian, not all ethnic Russians, but pro-Russian people live there. And I think one of the lessons of this conflict is that Russia can't continue to allow vulnerabilities to exist, that if they stop this conflict short of securing a land bridge to Transnistria, then NATO and the collective West will use that as the next crisis. So there is a need for Russia to seize the southern tier of Ukraine, which means the city of Odessa, the Black Sea coast, and link up with Transnistria. But this is an extreme move because once you make this move, it's the end of Ukraine. Ukraine has no viability after this. Ukraine's future is dependent upon continued access to the Black Sea. The Russians also know that they haven't, while they have mobilized 300,000 reservists, probably another 200,000 volunteers, and this force is sufficient to destroy the Ukrainian military, it's not sufficient to occupy all of Ukraine. And I don't believe Russia wants to occupy all of Ukraine. But the second part of this victory equation is denazification. That is, how do you eliminate from Ukraine the cancer of Nazi ideology, the legacy of Stepan Bandera, who continues to motivate political parties. He's the national hero of Ukraine. They sing songs about him. Denazification means the termination of Stepan Bandera as a motivating factor in Ukraine. How can you do that if you don't occupy all of Ukraine? And the answer is that you have to get Ukraine to agree to terms of surrender that include constitutional reforms that outlaw Stepan Bandera in Ukraine, just like Adolf Hitler has been outlawed in Germany. two aspects to this. One is the stick. You're going to pound the living you-know-what out of Ukraine. And that's what Russia's getting ready to do. The strategic air campaign has already taken out critical infrastructure. The electrical grid is under stress. Russia's going to start taking out bridges, tunnels, roads, and they're just going to collapse the society of Ukraine. It's tragic, tragic. Tens of millions of people are going to be displaced. Thousands are going to be killed. And Ukraine as a functioning modern state will cease to exist. Hopefully, from the Russian perspective, the collapse of Ukraine as a society will lead to a transformation of the political reality in Ukraine, meaning that Ukrainians will reject Zelensky. That's the goal. Not that Russia is going to occupy Kiev, but that Ukrainians will evict Zelensky and put in place a government willing to negotiate with Russia on terms dictated by Russia. That's the stick. The carrot is Odessa. So the Odessa moment is when, after Russia has accomplished all that it's going to accomplish in eastern Ukraine, to secure Russian territories, to push the Ukrainians back 150 kilometers, maybe acquire new territories in the form of Kharkov and maybe other oblasts in that region, ethnically Russian dominated, before pivoting south and making the push through Odessa. The Odessa moment is what I believe would be a pause, where the Russians stop. The Ukrainians are confronted with the reality that they no longer have a military. They cannot defend themselves. And to continue, Russia will eliminate their ability to have any future at all. And Russia will say, we can stop the war now if you meet our conditions, and you will continue to have Odessa, the southern tier, access to the Black Sea. Now, there will be conditions, meaning that Russia will have to have some sort of guarantees about access to Transnistria. The land bridge, while it may be sovereign Ukrainian territory, Russia will have certain amounts of autonomy to ensure secure lines of communication. They're not just going to let Ukraine have Odessa. Ukraine lost the right when they burned 48 ethnic Russians to death in the trade union building back in 2014. When they took down the statue of Catherine the Great. Ukraine lost the right to have Odessa. But the Odessa moment, I believe, will be Russia's effort to negotiate an outcome that doesn't require them to take the next step. And the next step would be to seize Odessa, seize the southern tier, et cetera. Let me make things clear, okay? This is purely my speculation. And I simply evaluated things. I came up with the Odessa moment listening to Vladimir Putin's answering a question from a Hungarian journalist last summer about visiting Odessa. And Putin's answer was very clever and had some humor in it, but he suggested that Odessa could be the key to peace or the key to ending the war. And so I'm building upon that statement to construct, based upon a logical progression of the battle as it currently appears to be going, that there will be an opportunity for Odessa to be that which Putin said it could be, a place where peace could occur or the war will be finished. So this is purely me making it up. No Russians called me up and say, hey, the Odessa moment, we're on board. I don't know. The Russians may be reading this saying, we don't agree with you, Scott. There's not going to be an Odessa moment. A lot of Russians said, no, we're taking Odessa. That's it. That could be. I'm giving you my assessment. But the reason why I believe it's attractive is that Russia has been very successful in managing escalation. If you notice, it's the West that's escalating all the time. They're the ones crossing red line after red line after red line after red line. And Russia does what? Shrugs it off and wins. So I don't think Russia wants to do something in the South that could provoke a NATO intervention. And so Russia is going to manage this conflict, manage escalation, and try to prevent any radical decision by NATO. And one way to get a radical decision is to present them with immediate problem of pressing urgency, such as the Russians are moving on Odessa. What do we do about it? But if Russia pauses and provides an opportunity for diplomacy, I think that will hold NATO into check and prevent a force-on-force conflict, which could lead to World War III. So I have confidence that Russia will continue to be the only adult in the room in this squabble amongst violence-prone children.